I'm gonna put this right here.
Sure.
And if you could just say your name and that you give me consent to record, that'd be great.
My name is Joshua, and I give you consent to record.
Okay, awesome. So I want to start off with like your upbringing.
Okay.
Tell me a little bit about how you grew up and like any details.
Sure. That's a big question.
Yeah. Or like, where did you grow up?
Mm-hmm.
Who were the people in your life? Like, who did you spend time with, and what was important to you, and stuff like that.
Sure. So I grew up in the Bay Area. My mom's side of the family is from San Francisco. They've been there for generations. Visitation Valley, Sunnydale area, and then over in the Mission District. And so I spent a lot of time there. My dad lived in San Mateo, and so Redwood City area, I'd be over there too. Household is pretty dysfunctional. I've been a ward of the court since I was, I think, 3 years old. So I've been in the system since really before I could remember. Around 10 years old, 10 and a half, I started going to juvenile hall. I went the first time for being in a stolen car. I didn't know how to drive because I was 10 and a half, so I'm not too surprised that I got caught. And things kind of snowballed from there. Once I was in the system, then I was on probation. So the county had a much more active role in my life and a more active role in the decisions of my life, right? So the state became my parent, so to speak. My mom used a lot of drugs, so she was a substance user. And I was really just kind of out in the streets a lot. Petty crimes, mostly stuff of economics. I didn't have money. I was homeless for a while. I would sleep in my friends' parents' cars. My brother and I would, find places to kind of crash. And that led to petty charges of just trying to get food or trying to get money, just to kind of sustain and survive. As my teenage years, as I worked towards my teenage years, started getting involved with more like neighborhood stuff, right? A lot of times they're called gangs. I think that word is overused, but that's what I guess what they would be considered. So getting caught with that, so I started going to juvenile hall more. I stayed on probation my whole adolescence. 16, I moved across the bay and I went to go live with my mom. So that was the first time that I lived with her. I stayed with my grandmother and other relatives, but that was the first time I lived with my mom. I had just gotten out of a program that the court sent me to in New Mexico, where I got my GED. So I was 16 in a new city and didn't have to go to school because I had my GED. I couldn't get a job. I had no work experience already, and I dressed like a homeboy from the neighborhood, right? So I didn't know how to dress properly for a job. I thought that creased up khakis was about as proper as I got. So yeah, I just started getting involved in problems over there pretty quickly. And yeah, I was at 19. I wound up going to prison for attempted murder.
So you said that you were in the system as early as like age 3.
Mm-hmm.
What happened? What led to that?
My mom and my dad's dysfunction. When I was a child, the court got involved early. So they were married. My mom was 14. They got married in Mexico. My mom was almost 15 when she had me, so she was very young. My dad was like 25 or 26, which I didn't fully realize how perverted that was at the time. And so she, long story short, she got stuck. She took me to Texas when I was a baby, and then she wanted to come back to California. And so she traded me to the people she was staying with for their car so that she could drive back to California. That led to Child Protective Services and stuff getting involved. And then my dad and my mom played keep away with me, and it was just an ugly mess, basically.
So you definitely moved around a lot. Texas.
Yes. Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember Texas at all. I just seen the paperwork when I got older. But I've been in California 99% of my life.
And you grew up with your siblings? You had a brother?
Yes, I have sisters and brothers. Yes. Yeah, I have a brother that's older. My younger brother got killed in 1995, and then I have 3 sisters.
Can I ask how Yeah. So like, what was your relationship with your siblings? And
Solid. I still have a good relationship with them all. Yeah, they're besides my kids, they're the most important people in my life.
that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about like still leading up to like going to prison, I guess. If you remember, like what was your day to day like? Did you hang out with your family most of the time, or like were you in school, or like where you already got your GED?
Mm-hmm.
I think we were 16, but like tell me a little bit about like the day to day and like the environment. Like how would you describe your environment?
For the most part, we just hung out. Very social. So I've always been a pretty social person. Much less so now. But when I was a teenager, I was really social. And so folks from the neighborhood, we would hang out. I would hang out with my siblings. And, you know, they were in school for the most part. So I would go visit their schools sometimes. We didn't have jobs, so we didn't have money. And so would break the law oftentimes to get money. But it wasn't, I think sometimes the way it's portrayed, like we weren't trying to get rich. We weren't trying to be real fancy. We were just trying to get some food. We were trying to pay the rent at the apartment, right? It kind of basic survival stuff. Otherwise, we just hung out. There was conflict sometimes with folks. Lived in an environment where we're not given the tools to navigate conflict very healthy. And so a lot of times things get violent because we don't know how else to do it. It's not that we're incapable. It's just that if a hammer is the only tool that you have, then the whole world looks like a nail, right? You just got to work with what you have. And so there's conflict sometimes, but also a lot of fun, right? We had fun, we laughed, we hung out, we supported each other. All of us had elements of dysfunction in our families. And obviously we all lived in a dysfunctional community, and so support each other through that. So it was good.
Can you tell me about one, like your favorite, happiest moment growing up?
Gosh, that is a much more difficult question than you might think. I can't think of. Yeah, come back to me on that one, because I'm not off the top of my head. I can't necessarily think of one.
Can I also ask like about a time of conflict that you remember?
Yeah, when my brother got killed, my little brother got murdered, and that was probably the lowest point in my life.
How old were you?
I was 17. He was 16, and so he had moved away in order to have more opportunities. He was an athlete in school, played football and baseball, made the varsity team his freshman year in high school for football. And so he had moved up into the Sacramento area to go to a high school up there that had a really good football team. And he wanted to get away from the conflict in the neighborhood, right? And that was never really his thing. He didn't like that sort of stuff. He just liked to play sports. But he also didn't hesitate to fight people who wanted to fight. He wasn't a bully, but if somebody wanted to fight, he was happy to oblige. And he went up there and got into a fight as the new kid at school from the Bay Area, right? Got into a fight over a girl. And somebody who wanted to be friends with the guy who he beat up took his dad's gun and shot him a couple days later outside of a liquor store.
That is crazy because he just moved there.
Yeah.
And he was just going there to play football.
Yep.
Yeah. How did your family take that, and like, because I guess that's so young to be like going through loss, you know?
Well, we had all experienced loss prior to that, right? We all knew people that had gotten killed. We all knew people that died from overdoses. And so the idea of somebody passing was not new, but that one obviously hit a lot closer to home. In particular, because I think he was viewed as a good kid, right? He got in some trouble, but compared to a lot of other people, he was the one that was going to go, quote unquote, make it, right? And then provide some level of comfort and relief to the family. And so for him to die in that process was pretty surprising.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and so you mentioned that your mom like had some trouble with like drug usage. Mm-hmm. So like, was your dad not so much around, and it was your mom or your grandparents, or like?
So my grandmother, my mom's mom, was around a lot. We kind of have a legacy on my mom's side of the family of women not being good parents, but being good grandparents. And so my dad was around. He had remarried to a lady earlier than I can remember. As far as I've known, they've always been together. And then they had a child together. So that's an additional sibling, right? And I think there was just a divide there. There was a point for me where I wasn't sure where I fit, right? And I think it rings true for most people that don't have both parents in the home. There's always wondering or wanting to know, like, but what about this other side of me? And when things aren't going well where you're at, it's a question of, well, would it be going better? You know, would my mom understand what my dad doesn't, right? And but also my mom is this quote unquote bad person, so is that why I'm a quote unquote bad person, right? And so I think there's a lot of emotional trauma that happens in those situations. But so yeah, I was around my dad, not around his family. He wasn't connected to his family. I was around my stepmom's family. There was big disconnects there too, just kind of like class disconnects, culture disconnects. It's just different. And but like I said, I've been in the streets, you know, for a long time, and so that's really where I was at. The streets, or in jail, or some group home, or program, or whatever, more so than with a relative caretaker.
Would you have liked to be more around like your mom and your dad?
I don't know. That's a hard thing to answer. Not really something I thought about. Kind of is what it is, right? And so I think with some situations, like with my brother, right? Would I have liked for my brother to still be here? Of course, right? That's very easy to respond to. But would I have wanted to be around my mom more? I don't know what that would have looked like, right? Would I wanted to be around my dad? I don't know what. It's hard to say that I would have preferred that because I don't really know what it looked like. As a kid, though, it's what I was looking for. But I filled that void elsewhere and then became satisfied with that and just kind of ran with it.
So growing up, I'd love to hear more about like your identity with yourself. Kind of like